be live, or it's like starting to
Oh,
uh,
yeah.
to load the stream. So I'm just going to take a second to pull it up
Oh, I see it.
and make sure it's live. Be live. Yep,
Yeah.
I think we're good. Um, all right. Well, thank you for joining me today, Mike. It's nice to get a chance to spend some time with you and hang out and talk with you and get to know you a little bit better. So the plan for today, I think, is I have a few questions, maybe some things like I'd like to get to know about you a little bit better, some of your background. I also want to ask you like questions about Pokemon and 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 your just history and TCGs in general.
Sure.
Um, then I think we'll probably talk a little bit about Metazoo. I both want to hear about like what the experience has been like for you in terms of like starting a game. I'm interested in like any and all information you want to share about like what that process was like, why you decided to do this. And then I want to talk about the market of Metazoo with you a little bit, and because we are a market channel, and I think that there's been a lot of interest and a lot of passionate takes around the prices on certain MetaZoo items, and I think it'd be interesting as the founder of it to or creator of it to get your take. So I guess just to start, if you could just share a little bit about like who you are, your interest in like TCGs in general, and maybe a little bit about like what why you came up with this product and decided to do this.
Sure. So yeah, I just turned 32 3 days ago. So I was a 90s baby, and I was kind of there for um, the golden days of Pokemon, such that they were when they started out, right? And so I collected Pokemon and Magic and some Yu-Gi-Oh, some Digimon, um, really from like 1998 to I want to say 2003. And then that was kind of mostly my Pokemon era. And then for 2003, I started playing Magic the Gathering with my friends, right around the Mirrodin era. So, and I played that until 2007. I played a little bit more Magic and Pokemon in college, but really stopped until 2016 when Pokemon Go came out. And I was actually at Oak Ridge National Lab doing neutron physics. And I remember like this small town of Oak Ridge with like, I think at the time had like 30,000 people. Like it took the small town by storm, right? And I was, one of my favorite stories is I was in the lab and there were these people in like radiological worker outfits, like swiping to catch Pokemon in like a radioactive area. So for me, that was kind of that revitalized my passion in Pokemon and Magic as well. And back then, like 2016, before Pokemon Go, I think you could find like fossil boxes for like 400 to 600 bucks. They were incredibly cheap. And so, I just started buying boxes to crack, right? And I really focused on early Pokemon history and learning about it and becoming obsessed with it, especially the Japanese era stuff and how the Pokemon company got started in Japan with their early products, and then what their strategy was when they came to the US, right? And I really started thinking like, this is so magical, especially with the Pokemon Go stuff. There's so much pent up demand for something like this feeling of nostalgia, this feeling of being a part of something that's new. And I wanted to create that, but with something new. And so I started, creating this game. It wasn't Metazoo at the time. It didn't have a name for, the first year or two. And then it also was named like Magicast. And then it became Metazoo finally sometime in 2018, I think. And yeah, like I ended up moving to New York to attend school at Columbia for my master's program in data science. And I was working at Goldman Sachs as well, really learning about kind of the alternative asset world and how if I wanted to build a company like this, being passionate about it, being creative about it isn't enough. I had to kind of think about how it would work as a CEO and manager, as like a creator that wanted to take care of this for the long term. And so I started thinking about the company really starting in 2018 as a company and like what my go-to-market strategy would be, right? And learning from sorry, my dog's freaking out. Learning from what Pokemon did. When Pokemon first came to the US, they formed a lot of strategic partnerships with companies that were US-based companies, right? So like Topps, I think Hasbro, no, it was actually Mattel, I think, and all of Mattel's properties. That's the reason why you don't see Lego Pokemons, because Mattel, I think, has like a non-compete. So anyways, but they had Colgate Pokemon products. They had all sorts of candy. So basically what they did is they came to the US, they partnered with all of these, established brands. And that to me was genius, right? That we have some of our best Pokemon collectibles as a result of these collaborations. But then Pokemon made the smart, like, financial decision kind of during that gap period before Pokemon Go of consolidating their costs and doing everything in-house. And they kind of abandoned or moved away strategically from those partnerships, right? And so when I created Metazoo, I was like, the best way to go about this is to be lean and to form these corporate partnerships where we could and really give people what they got with Pokemon 20 years ago, which was everything they could possibly want. That's Metazoo. So hats, a Topps product, plushies, pins, T-shirts, like everything that you can possibly imagine that allows them to express their love for Metazoo, we could facilitate through these corporate partnerships with brands that already exist and that people know and trust. And when reaching out to these companies, they're like, oh, we've been waiting so long for this, like, for another company to come along that wants to do this kind of thing. And so they've jumped on the opportunity, which is that explains kind of the growing ecosystem that you see with Metazoo. So that's kind of the story as to how I got involved. Obviously there's years that I kind of watched over of printing a lot of these cards at my house. And 2008, I call it a house. It was a small apartment when I was at Columbia, but I have all these cards where I was prototyping them in my home printer, and really getting a feel for what I wanted to do with Metazoo. But that's kind of the broad strokes of it.
Yeah, so you have both interest in systems, in business, in running a company and figuring out how to do it successful from a financial perspective, and you have a long time interest in TCGs, in CCGs, in card games. So yeah. Why Metazoo? Why Cryptids? I guess is my first question. Before maybe we go back into digging into some of that market stuff, which I think is really interesting.
Sure.
And then also for the chat, we're going to open it up, for plenty of questions as well. After we have like a chat for a little bit. So definitely if people want to start putting in their questions, we will get to them, or we'll get to some.
Oh yeah. I see a lot of good questions. But for me, I grew up watching things like Mothman Prophecies. My mom loves things like In Search of Bigfoot, like these shows that exist on Cryptids, all, tragically on like the Discovery Channel and the History Channel and other channels like that. And, I grew up in Brazil, and in Brazil, we had this, subculture called Candomblé, which kind of was a mixture of the indigenous populations, folklore, but mixed with kind of the strong sense of Catholicism. So you had like creatures that were there that I would call cryptids that were, pretty, present throughout my childhood. And then when I came to the US for college, when I was 18, I just loved reading about this stuff, right? It was like mythology in action, right? And they're discovered every day, right? So like the Fresno Nightcrawlers is from the past decade, right? So every time someone drinks a lot of alcohol and goes out shooting with their friends, and they see something crazy in the bush, you have the emergence of a cryptid, and it's not a US phenomenon, it's all over the world, right? So when I was thinking like, I could create characters, but wouldn't it be more special if I took characters that already exist in the real world, kind of like we want Pokemon to exist in the real world, and base it around that, right? And if you think about it, like cryptids, they exist all over the world, and tens of millions, if not more, people know about them and love them, kind of, and they've developed in isolation in these pockets all over the world. If you're a Mothman fan, you might not necessarily be a Bigfoot geek, right? And especially if you're in a local area that has that cryptid that's specific to that local area, right? So like Lake Worth, Texas, has the Lake Worth monster. And I have people who come up to me at conventions like, I can't believe you included my local cryptid. Like when I was in college, like we'd go out hunting for it. It was so cool. We tried it. Or, when I was in DC for college, the Bunny Man of Virginia, like people knew what that was, right? The Bunny Man tunnel. And so, we would scare each other, and to every time we'd go out like partying, we'd be like, we should drive out to Bunny Man Bridge and see who can stay under it for the longest. Right. And so even though a lot of these characters, most of them, weren't created by me, what I hope Metazoo could become when I kind of decided on cryptids, right, was a lightning rod for all these people who are already really passionate about these creatures, and they've existed for hundreds of years in some cases, especially when you extend the definition of of cryptids to things like yokai in Japan. Yokai are really just cryptids plus a few hundred years, right? And so, that kind of was my decision making. I was like, this is something really special. I want Metazoo to be a focal point for all of these things that already exist out there.
Yeah, I really like horror movies, and I really like monsters, and and honestly, my favorite part often of horror movies, I tend to like more in like scary stories. I tend to like the story more than like the gore or just the kind of grossness or intensity of and so I think for me, I think that having a card game built around, if there's a way to incorporate those stories in a way that and into the art in a way that gave me some of those feelings, I think that would be something that would be very appealing to me. And cryptids are something that I don't know how many people grew up. It's interesting when you have these people like coming up to you, at conventions. And I'm interested to hear, people in the chat. And, this is a small group of hardcore Pokemon people here. But, if people kind of were aware of these cryptids, because one thing that was interesting to me is like I've never heard of Mothman. I know Mothman's like a fairly popular cryptid or a big cryptid or some of these cryptids, but there were only like a couple that I had heard of. Do you find that these are like massively popular and I'm in the minority, or do you think that most people haven't heard of these things and through the game they're going to learn them a bit more, connect with them? Or like what's your take on from your experience on like how well known these cryptids are in the general public?
Sure. Yeah. I think in the US, these shows that focus on kind of, not just Bigfoot, but like other cryptids that have a viewership of the hundreds of thousands. So, there are shows that are like they go out and they investigate the Goatman Bridge or something like that, or Popelik Bridge, right? And I do know that those shows do fairly well. And I do know from in what you might call small town America, these cryptids are very well known. And if you look at like Hodag, which is from Rhineland, Wisconsin, like they have high school teams with the Hodag as its like mascot, right?
Oh, interesting.
So these things permeate U.S. culture, and especially in places like Japan, like they're everywhere. I don't think that people have, outside of the cryptid community, I don't think a lot of people notice them all that much. Like they don't impact their lives all that much. But what I hope that Metazoo could be is not just a lightning rod, but also a way of kind of spreading this culture, right? Because I do think it's an important part of U.S. culture or North American culture, or any culture that has them as like a prevalent part of or potentially prevalent part of their culture. And what I'm seeing is a lot of people who pick up the TCG from the TCG community who may not know who Mothman is, well, they sure as hell will learn after they look it up and they like, hey, this card's really cool. And you know, hey, why is it the chase card? What's the story behind it? And so I'm seeing it grow. I'm seeing it kind of merge, like all these different pockets of cryptid communities merge. And the glue is these people who weren't a part of those cryptid communities per se, but more a part of or have more interest in the TCG aspect that are kind of like bridging those gaps and learning more about cryptids.
From like a long-term like market perspective, like let's say, you know, this game becomes very popular, you have lots of people playing it. Legally, how does it work with like, could other, like in terms of like owning the intellectual property, like what is Metazoo, like what would they own, what wouldn't they own in terms of, because you can't own, like anyone could make cards, right, of Sasquatch, I assume, or did you purchase some sort of rights to make those types of cards or use that name, or it's these are stories, or these are things that anyone can make things of, or how does all that work? Curious.
So yeah, it's a good question. They're what's called public domain, right?
Okay.
So anyone can make a Mothman card or a Sasquatch card if they wanted to, but the Metazoo Mothman and that representation of it is trademarked or copyrighted. And that is, you know, that's important. It's kind of like, you know, Sherlock Holmes is public domain, right? But it's kind of like saying like, does that mean that you can't make money or you know, merchandise off of the Sherlock Holmes movies or TV shows that have been made as a result of it being in the public domain? It's like, oh, you can if you represent it in a way that's unique and special and kind of captures the hearts and minds of people. And so that's, you know, that's what we want to do with Metazoo. And, you know, there is kind of like a main IP focal point, which is the backstory. So, you know, there's a story that I'm writing and we're about to release the 3rd chapter this month, which is, you know, it takes place 10 years into the future. And that does have like, you know, characters that we made up, but it also has all these cryptids that are, you know, interacting in the story and whatnot. So the hope is that by having a Metazoo story, people will associate, you know, these characters that have existed. You know, a really good example is like Lord of the Rings, right? Like elves and gnomes and dwarves are, you know, they're mythological creatures that have existed for hundreds of years. But, you know, people associate the idea of elves with many different IPs, but certainly the Lord of the Rings elves have a special place in people's hearts. And that's what I'm hoping for with Metazoo for sure. Yeah,
that was actually going to be my follow-up question, was going to be something like, are you going to try to create basically a world for these characters that is, you know, specific to sort of Metazoo? So where did the term Metazoo come from? What does Metazoo mean? How does that represent the game?
Yeah. So originally it was Magic Cast because I just thought it was cool, magic and casting, right? And I went through like a bunch of different like iterations. I ended up doing zoo because it was kind of like zoological. So it wasn't just cryptids. So I didn't want cryptids in the name. You know, mythological creatures, folklore creatures, urban legends, you know, cryptids, yokai, even potentially religious figures too, right? So zoo kind of captured that creature aspect, right? And then meta comes from the fact that we have a lot of mechanics that break the fourth wall, right? So in a TCG, you know, you have the meta of a card or of the gameplay or whatever. And so it's kind of like a play on words related to that. So Metazoo, I said it once after like a 5-hour conversation with my girlfriend about what we should call it. And it just like, it stuck in my head at least.
Yeah, it's always interesting to hear like I can't remember the story now, but I read something about like how they came up with like Google and you know, like pushing words together or just something that sounded cool, and how these things are decided. I'm working on some like startups and different sorts of things and have been like trying to figure out names also. So it's an interesting journey trying to figure out a name that you think is going to be like catchy and that people are going to like.
Yeah, and you just gotta like, at some point you got to stick with it and be like, all right, this is
the brand.
And then, if it ends up sounding a little silly, so be it. But Metazoo, I think it's kind of like one of those things that people, because of the brand that they associate with it, doesn't sound too strange because it automatically feels like the word pillow is kind of a weird word, but because it's associated with something that's very commonplace in our lives, we don't think twice about it.
So I think I guess the for lack of a better word, the drama or the heat around Metazoo, I think comes from a couple of different places, and I want to discuss it with you here today, and also have people be able to ask you questions freely. So I think that from my perspective, and I'd like to hear your perspective on this too, there seems to be a few different takes. There takes I hate the art. There takes something about this game and the art really specifically offend me. And I think that part of it can come from it's copying Pokemon. I think from the Pokemon community, I think there's that feeling. And I'd love to, just hear your feelings about that, your response to that. Do you feel sympathetic, empathetic? Do you feel like it's do you understand that? Do you feel like that's unfair, fair, what have you? And then I think the second big one, which I do think's tied into that, and I think most people wouldn't care about that stuff that much if there wasn't so much money being made, and not necessarily by you or by the actual company yet, but also potentially you, and maybe you in the long run, because there is money in a successful game, but also in the short run by people who might be speculating on it, influencers, right? Lots of concerns about, Rudy, partnering with Rudy or Gary, or, these people that have big followings. And then a lot of people look to kind of be taste makers and taste setters about what we should like and what we should buy. Sure. And I think that these things are complicated, questions about where is the line between good marketing. And I think this very strong negative take people are having is this is a cash grab, right? These types of things, this is a cash grab, whether it's a short-term pump and dump, which I very much don't believe it is, or a longer term sort of your main focus, or the people involved's main focus, or these influencers' main focus is just about money, or primarily about money. And I think for some people that rubs people the wrong way. I think others, it's sort of that's what companies should do, and businesses are about making money, so it also gets in this very interesting political moment, right? and people's feelings around making money, which I think are very heated as well. So I'd love to just, have that conversation with you and with people here, and where hopefully everyone, including people in the chat, we can listen to each other and be respectful of where other people, are coming from. So
I'll so the art question first, if you like.
Yeah, let's start there.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I first sought out artists, I was looking for, artists that I could afford, which were people who were, young artists on Instagram that were my age or younger, and had a style that I liked, which was kind of, I love the old Sugimori traditional art style. And, I reference it a lot when I talk about what makes Metazoo's art stand out. And I think it's, brilliant. And I think that, I tell the artists very specifically, I want to replicate kind of that vintage 90s style that you didn't just see in Pokemon, but also in a lot of other TCGs. And it's really only an effect that you can get by using traditional medium. But yeah, I have a huge respect for Rita and Sugimori, and kind of the aesthetic that they set. And with the artists, a lot of them are super young and just kind of getting started. So a lot of the art is not perfect, but I think that there's something special about that as well, especially since they are just starting out. We'll kind of be able to see them develop with the game, which I think is awesome. But yeah, no, I mean, I think it's baked into the product very publicly, so that I want to replicate that vintage style. And I think that it adds something special to the game for sure. And I don't think that's a bad thing. And I don't think the artist not being perfect is a bad thing either. I think it adds a little bit of charm. So regarding the advertising with influencers and stuff. So, I've been watching Rudy, I think since 2017. I've always been a huge fan of Gary. And there are a few other people who are big in the community that when I, started the Kickstarter product, I was like, I'd love to send you some stuff. You don't have to do any videos on it. Just, and in case of Gary, he actually contributed to the Kickstarter. Like, you don't have to do any videos on it. I would love just to hear your feedback. Now, the hope obviously is that they'll like the product and talk about it. But at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, I'm going to do what I can to advertise my product and try and build the Metazoo community. I think that they've done a tremendous job with the Pokemon community and just TCGs in general, and kind of spreading the love and debating kind of the things that need to be debated. And they've added so much to the culture, and not just these influencers, but medium ones and smaller ones and ones that are just getting started out as well. And so, I just think that wasn't, there's certainly a fine line to walk with that, but no one got enough product. Everyone got, any influencer that got product enough to like test out. Like, no one was getting hundreds of boxes or anything that they could then turn around and make money from. And in the event of like someone like, Steve Aoki, I think I sent a little kit to, and it's like, if Steve Aoki wanted to take those 3 boxes that I sent him when the boxes were going for $50 and turn around and make profit off of them, it's like, how much money is the dude worth, right? Like, Gary is another great example where it's like, I don't think I could pay him money to advertise a product if I wanted to. He did it because he likes the product. And that's what I was hoping for when reaching out to these influencers. And some of them told me to go screw myself or didn't respond, or, and that's perfectly fine. But the ones that did want to get involved, got involved, and it was very organic in that sense. There was no stipulation that they had to make video or content in return for the product that I sent them.
Yeah, I think there's this theme, right, of like trust or lack of trust, or trusting people's motives, or not believing that people have good motives. And so it's like, when you say, it's like, well, I made this card game because I'm passionate about this and I want people to enjoy this, it's like, what percentage of you is being driven by, you want to make money and you want prestige and you want, all of the things that, you want to be successful and you want to do something that's challenging. You're a human being. And so I think that there's a little, you don't even need to parse out what percentage you think those things are. But I think it's a little bit strange. One thing I see, the way people treat like influencers or people who try to create or do something, they hold them to like an impossible standard of humanity, of some sort of like saint like standard. And I think that within that, the problem is that you sort of lose the nuance of like, where did Michael or where did Metazoo maybe go too far or make a mistake in a comment, versus like, they're not allowed to try and make money at all, or they're not allowed to try to grow their product at all, or, just very black and white, like, we don't want Metazoo to be successful at all. Like, it can't promote itself at all or sell to anyone. So,
yeah, I mean, look, for me, Metazoo I want Metazoo to make money, right? And I want it to be unpopular, and I want it to be one of those TCGs that have a cultural impact. But, I left a job that paid me very well. And so if money were the only ambition, I could have just stayed in that job. But, I wanted to make a game that, and trust me, there are certainly easier ways of making money than creating an entire TCG, to the extent that I have, right? Certainly. And I think a lot of people, that's lost on a lot of people who think that it's just easy to throw up a Kickstarter. Or at least I think I've moved beyond that now, because I've actually delivered on this product multiple times and so on and so forth, right? Certainly easier ways to make money. But yeah, make no mistake, I am human, and I would love to make money off of this, but I'd love to make money off of something that I'm passionate about, which I think is a very sane and reasonable thing to do. I'd rather make money off of my own game and creation than, I don't know, building tractors at a really good rate that makes me a lot of money, right? And for some people, building tractors is something that they're super passionate about. And if they make money off of that, all the more power to them. But it does seem a little bit odd to me that people were like, how dare you promote this in this way? And, but I also think that that's not unexpected. I think that I was aware that that was going to happen regardless. And I think that it's actually just a vocal minority. So I'm not too, I try to see kind of what feedback there is in those voices rather than offhand, just like reject them entirely. And I think the product is, and the brand is better as a result of me listening to that, to the extent that listening to that is good for my mental health. Because I can listen to negative stuff all day. And I think, I have a job to do. And so sometimes I just have to cancel that noise and move forward with the work that needs to be done with Metazoo.
Yeah. And I think like some of those voices can be good to keep someone like you in check, or me in check, or anyone, because I think that when you get into a position of like power or control, we're human, and there's a potential to like abuse that, or to pump and dump, it's like when people look at you and they trust you and they believe in you, you can choose to kind of use that for your own advantage, or you can choose to cooperate with people and create something that they love and that they care about. And so, for example, within this certain situation, it's like, like it can be yet to be seen. It's like, well, 5-10 years from now, Metazoo could continue to do well. And like, it could be very obvious, hopefully over that time, people who have dealt with you, that like, you really care about the fan base. You want every person who buys Metazoo to have a good experience and a good time. You don't want people buying product at extremely high secondary, market type stuff, and then losing, potentially losing money or getting hurt by that, or getting caught up in that sort of hype, even if it does benefit the game in some other ways.
Sure.
And so I think that, and for me too, someone who's like started a Patreon or started like a business in Pokemon to some extent, it's that constant sort of thing of like, why are you doing it? And are you providing enough, value, basically, to use the buzzword entrepreneur word, to justify the prices you're doing, to justify the decisions you're making? And are you being greedy, or are you, taking, and that type of thing. So, I think early on in Metazoo, you made like a video that I think was deleted, where you were comparing Metazoo to Pokemon and talking about like, this is going to be like Pokemon, or this card's going to be like Pokemon. And I think another criticism I've heard of the Metazoo is like, you seem to have put so much attention into promoting it and not as much into like the gameplay, or making the game good, or even getting the product out to people that they could test it before pushing it through the influencers who got everyone really excited in it. And you kind of chose, maybe less playable influencers and more market influencers. So how do you respond to those criticisms? Did you also try playable influencers, or, and do you feel like there aren't that many playable influencers? I'd love to hear your responses to those sorts of things.
Yeah. So I think with that initial video, it was the first box of Metazoo that I was opening, and I was just kind of geeking out. And because, going into this, I very much, I think that the comparisons to Pokemon as a source of inspiration were obvious to me. And I was, I'm very public about that. Me saying that this is going to be the Charizard of the set or whatever was me talking about my personal favorites. But yeah, make no mistake, I baked collectability with some really good examples from the past as my guideline into the product. A game doesn't have to be inherently very competitive or playable in order for it to also be collectible. People will enjoy products in different ways, right? That being said, I put in a lot of effort into making the game playable. And I think that what people have as a misnomer almost is they think that because I focus on the collectible aspect, that it's somehow mutually exclusive from it being playable. And I think that I could have made a better choice of sending product out to people who actually would have played the game and tested it out. Like that could have been a whole other suite of individuals that I sent product to. It just wasn't it wasn't something that I thought too deeply about initially. I was like, these are the people that I watch. I want to send it to them, right? But I sent product also to Red Rogue Zone, who plays it quite a bit, Kitchen Tabletop, TCG, who is really big in the Flesh and Blood scene, and more importantly, like I send it to some people who just weren't public about me sending it to, right? And so the public perception, and this is kind of, I don't want to say it, I want to say this delicately, because those influencers were more public about it, people assume I didn't send it to anyone else, but I did. Those people just didn't make videos on them, or it was a private conversation, or, the videos came out later. But yeah, certainly I think with Nightfall, I can do a better job of having different categories of influencers, quote unquote, that I send product to that serve a different purpose for review. But yeah, in terms of the game being playable, that was always the intention. And I don't think that's mutually exclusive from collectability.
How do you feel about the secondary market right now? Are you surprised by the prices?
It's a good question. Like, I wouldn't say that I'm surprised in the sense that I worked really, really hard for years on the product. And so people recognizing that, or what I hope is recognition of the quality and the potential of the product is really, it makes me feel good about the time and effort and blood and sweat and tears that I put into the product. Right. That being said, I'm certainly not making money off of those prices. So what they allow me to do, though, is they allow me to go to investors or to other companies that I want to form partnerships with and say, look at what's happening in this market, or how do I justify to a VC fund why we need to actually create this product versus another product. That kind of finger on the pulse that the secondary market shows justifies decisions about who we want to partner with, and makes those partnerships easier to actually facilitate. And it allows us to create a roadmap for which products are successful and not successful. But yeah, I mean, look, the secondary prices for all collectibles it's going crazy right now. And I think we kind of, we're along for the ride on that much larger macro trend that we're seeing in the market right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think from my perspective, it's like, just being candid, right? Like, it's these Kickstarter boxes don't go for $6,000 each. Sample cards, like Mothman sample cards, don't sell for $30,000 plus if they're graded. If there isn't some, in a game that is this new with this small of a base, even though these things are fairly rare, like, that's incredibly huge prices. Given if we look at, and you don't need to necessarily respond, and your job as a CEO, versus, you maybe should just be like, yep, that's secondary market activity. And like, I'm just literally not going to think about it. I'm just going to try to do a good, I think if I were in your position, that's what I would be doing, is I'd be thinking, like, just putting my head down, right, and doing my role. And like, that's not my role, and that's going to happen, but I think that part of the anger or frustration can come from like, did you cause this, or was this the goal of Metazoo? One. And then two is like this idea that, like when you said, like, this is these prices are a reflection of sort of like your hard work or the product, I would say that they're largely a reflection of, and I like Metazoo, by the way, I like the product, but I would say they're largely a reflection of people who are trying to get rich off of it and trying to flip it and make money. And people like might really love Metazoo, and I think that's awesome. I just feel like it's a little bit hard to like really love something that you've known for like 5 months or 4 to 5 months, particularly at those prices, when we have things that like, Batman, Superman, these, sports rookie card, like these collectibles, and all these amazing worlds, right? Like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, we talked about, like, products that are just as rare in those markets, not selling for nearly what Metazoo is selling. And I don't think that that's a slight on like Metazoo isn't really cool and people don't actually like it. So I think people can hear that and they can be like, well, that means Metazoo's terrible and it should be awful. It's like, no, it's just wow, those prices based on something that people are just engaging with for the first time, you know? And so, yeah, I'm interested in your opinion on those things. And then I'm really interested in, do you feel like that's good or bad? Or do you feel like there are good and bad things for Metazoo in the long run, that a lot of that speculative sort of, you know, investor sort of hype is going on where people are buying this to make money. And I know firsthand, a lot of my friends bought these boxes to then flip them again to make money. And they were not diehard fans of Metazoo, and that's zero insult to you. And as I said, I like it and hope it's successful, but it's just sort of the reality of why some people, and maybe a decent amount, are buying it. Now, a lot of people bought Pokemon this year for the exact same reason. And this is where I get at it with the Pokemon people. It's like, you know, nothing is, every collectible hobby, there's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of that going on in sports. There's a lot of going on in everywhere, but there's also a long, large history that people have with the Pokemon characters, right? With Batman, with Superman, with sports cards. And that's a little bit different from Metazoo. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll say that again, with the cryptids, for a lot of the cryptid junkies out there, or, you know, major fans out there, cryptids have existed in their lives for decades, right? And those communities have certainly existed for longer than, certainly longer than Pokemon, and in some cases longer than DC or Marvel have ever existed, right? Okay. And so, you know, I do have people who come up to me and they're like, no, I've loved this cryptid for a very long time. But, you know, I'll also say that when you compare a new IP to an old IP, and you say, you know, things are so accelerated now with this, like, you know, how can you fall in love with something that hasn't been around for 20 or 30 years? I mean, you know, you could say the same thing about Pokemon back in 1999, 98, when it first hit the shores of the US. It's kind of like, there certainly was a craze associated with it then, and not with the people who were the core fans of it with, you know, back in Japan, right? So falling in love with an IP or anything that you want to consume, you know, in the market, I think it's actually a fairly short process. And that's what we're seeing right now, hopefully, is the genesis of very long-term memories that do develop in nostalgia. Now, you know, I think that there are huge macro trends that are happening right now that Metazoo is certainly benefiting from. And I can't really speak to the prices or whether or not they're justified because, A, I don't think that I could explain them in a way that's cogent. And B, I don't think I understand enough of the macro trends to actually like say, but what I will say is people who are looking at the prices, you know, I'm assuming that back in the day, the only way that you could really get secondary prices was from like the magazine that was published like monthly. Now people can see what the sold prices are on a daily basis, right? And so that cyclical market adjustment happens hourly as opposed to monthly now.
Yep.
And that doesn't mean that you don't reach an equilibrium point where prices stabilize. You certainly do, but they stabilize at a point where people are comfortable. I mean, that's the whole point of the equilibrium, right? It stabilizes at a point where people are comfortable selling and comfortable at buying it. The bigger question is whether or not I think this is good for Metazoo long term. And I'm going to kind of come at that from a different angle, which is I think that more people know about Metazoo and can love Metazoo now on the merit of it just being something that they want to love and play and collect because of the hype surrounding it, than they would have been exposed to had that hype not happened, right? And so, you know, even when people post videos that are incredibly negative, right? People who watch that are like, oh shit, like what's this Metazoo thing? Like, you know, I certainly would like to check it out, and then, you know, they might end up loving it, right? So in the sense of the longevity of the brand as an IP, or the IP as a brand, I think the more people talking about it, the better. Now, I do think that it sucks that people can't get the cards to play, And you know, when Kickstarter sold out, I was like, all right, we're going to do 10 times as much. But you know, what I was looking at was kind of like the upward trend, not how much the upward trend was upward trending. So, but I also didn't have the money to print anymore, right? And so, you know, moving forward, it's kind of like a gamble. Like, do I do 10 times as much as first edition for second edition base set? And if I do, you know, is that overprinting it? And is this just going to be sitting in a local game store for a few years? And do I lose partners as a result of that? Do I underprint it to make it more collectible, but then people won't be playing it? There's this whole kind of like tug of war happening, I think, with any game that does this. And we're seeing it with Flesh and Blood right now. It's just really hard to do it. I would like everyone to have cards, but at the same time, even people who play cards, play the game, enjoy the idea that they can collect cards that are expensive, right? Like that's part of the fun. People interact with things in all sorts of different ways, and sometimes ways that contradict each other. You know, like I really want to play the game, but I also want to buy and sell these cards for really high prices. And it's like, that's okay. People are complicated individuals, you know, and their passion is a complicated feeling, or at least multifaceted. So, you know, I think it's too early to see what the benefit or negative feedback loop of this will be. I'm certainly excited to be on the ride for it though. And I'm excited to, you know, going back to Pokemon coming out in 1999 and people falling in love with it instantly. They had a much larger push to market with all these different, like that, you know, the anime, the game, and as a benefit of having already developed those in Japan, right? So now I'm almost playing catch up, but I think we're going to play catch up fairly well. And I think we're going to give people who want to consume more of the brand in that particular way options. And that's kind of all I can do at this point. Because people don't want to, like, we're all talking about the cards, but it's more than just the cards, right? It's the whole ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with your takes on that. And you know, like if I were in your situation and I was starting a game, like I would want it to be collectible because I like to collect, right? And so, you know, and so for example, and I want to ask you about the sample cards, but like creating those sample cards or creating these medals that you've created, that creates collectability, that creates scarcity and rarity. It creates different tiers. Having a Kickstarter box and then a first edition and then maybe an unlimited or whatever, it creates certain items that are going to be more hard to find, that are going to have more of a chase, that are going to have more of a natural kind of value. And you making those decisions is going to cause, if Metazoo is successful, there are going to be some cards that have more value than others. It's the same thing that Pokemon is doing with the hyper rares and with the different, you know, levels of rarity that they introduced. It's the same thing that, I mean, look at sports has done it to the extreme, right? I mean, look at National Treasures where you have millions of one-of-ones and they charge $4,000 to $5,000 a box. You know, where's the anger at that? If you're upset with companies and businesses trying to make money off of making things, you know, creating scarcity and rarity. And I think what the magic of certain collectibles and why they became so valuable is because they were not scarce initially. And so they became massively popular. So if we look at Pokemon, part of Pokemon's huge success was they printed base set into oblivion so that everyone got to experience it and fall in love with it.
Yeah.
And so here's where the danger of prices being this high, this early on certain things can be, which is that, you know, for Pokemon, they weren't, right? I mean, it was difficult to find product, but then they had base set 2 for that reason, so that everyone could get it.
Yeah.
Legendary Collection, another attempt at getting everyone those arts, you know, and then Evolutions, and they printed that into oblivion so everyone could get those arts too. So it's sort of like that balance of and then what happened was because the cards had so little value, they were all played with and destroyed and, you know, and all that sort of thing. And so the ones that survived in really mint condition, it creates that sort of natural, you know, and when I say natural, I mean, not necessarily intended by the company, but it kind of happened just, naturally with the collector base. And I think that this is true for all collectibles today, you know, including modern Pokemon and also Metazoo is like everyone who opened one of those Metazoo Kickstarter boxes takes every single card and places it in a double, very careful sleeve. And so there are lots of reasons why I think that speculating on this stuff is difficult and different. And I do think a lot of people, it's my personal opinion, are speculating on Metazoo and on some of the higher end stuff for the short term to make short term money. I think others are probably holding it for the long term, but I also don't deny. I think it's a very interesting and a great point, and I think it's really important. And I think that you have to be careful. Just because something doesn't mean something to you, it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean something to other people. And what I mean specifically is like cryptids, right? Like just because cryptids, for anyone listening, may not mean a lot to your life, and you look at cryptids and you're like, whatever, that's not Pikachu. Pikachu means everything to me. Cryptids are nothing. For someone else, cryptids really could mean a lot. And, as you said, and that you've met people who have come up to you and said, I've been following these cryptids my whole life. And actually, I do have a connection from my childhood from cryptids. And now I can own a card of my favorite cryptid. And that does mean something to me, even if it's not the card that they had when they were a kid. And so I think there are some issues there in terms of value. And that's part of why I asked, like, well, if cryptids become huge, why don't they just make more card games about cryptids? And why would Metazoo be the one that would be successful? So it gets into that sort of thing. Is it the Metazoo IP, or is it the cryptid, which Metazoo doesn't necessarily own? So all I think interesting stuff. Anything else you wanted to kind of touch on with us, just in our conversation before maybe we just like open it up for some questions? I think I kind of touched on most of the stuff I'm sure I forgot a bunch of stuff because I don't make notes, and this is all just by the seat of our pants here, but
I think we covered it. And I'm sure, like, looking back at the questions, we'll see all sorts of questions that people have. We can touch on those.
Cool. Yeah. And if you have any questions that you want to answer directly, Mike, feel free to just, like, I don't need to lead everything. So feel free to just, if something looks like you'd like to answer it,
For sure. So why don't we both look, and you can start off with the first one that you see.
Really cool. For sure. Otherwise, I'm just going to head back to the beginning. And two, if you want to like look at the bottom of the chat too, and see if people are asked follow-up questions, we can go directly into that. Let's see. Let's see.
Lots of really respectful and kind people in the chat.
People are saying really rude things.
I mean, they're poking fun. I will say that, like, I do want us to touch on this. The 100 of each sample card, I mean, that's all I could afford at the time, right? Like, you have to understand, back then, there were only maybe a few hundred people who were interested in the game. So things like this, like, it's been scaling very organically with the print run numbers. And that's what I'm worried about moving forward, is because, like, I don't have a really good gauge as to what the print run should be for the next sets or whatever, because I have no idea really what the true market size is. Whereas before, like, I was sending out all the sample cards for free, right? And I couldn't get people to sign up. I got like maybe 400 people to sign up over the course of 2 weeks. And that was like a good gauge. And I was like, all right, well, this gives me an idea. I could probably print, 2.5K booster boxes and sell them out over the course of a few months. And, but then things took off. And so it's hard to gauge this, but I would say that the print numbers so far, it hasn't been artificial scarcity for most of the products. It's been responsive. It's been scarcity. It's been like retrospective scarcity as a result of demand outpacing orders that were placed at the printer months in advance. I just want to explain that.
That's good.
And then there are obviously
there's an intentional, like a direct intentional, like, we're going to make this scarce, even though there's more demand for it, to create hype around it,
Yeah,
you're going to,
although there are cards that are certainly like that, like Red Ink, which is like an actual secret rare that I didn't tell anyone about until it was revealed. Like, there are only 100 of them, but you know what? That's fun. And I think that things like that are really cool to have in a game.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly agree with that. I wish Pokemon would do more exclusive stuff and one-on-one. I want them to do things like one-of-one sketch cards, like things that like Marvel cards are doing. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but
we haven't inserted them yet into the product. I will say that, like, as long as that scarcity isn't detrimental to the gameplay, like good. Like what Magic did with fetch lands, where for a long time fetch lands were incredibly expensive, but they were core to the actual gameplay of the TCG. That was a little kind of like, that's, I think, crossing the line where it's like that's artificial scarcity that impacts the playability of the game. But Red Ink is it's fun, right?
So I mean, one thing that I find interesting, so this video has like 12 dislikes so far, which is interesting. And I'm wondering what those people are disliking. One, two, I'm curious. Two, I'm seeing people, particularly in the beginning in the chat, say that this is like a money grab. Money grab, money grab, money grab. Money makes the world go round. Money is evil, these types of things. I've been getting some comments from people. Like I had one comment saying, I used to love your channel, but now that you've like started a Patreon and are trying to make money off of this too, you don't really care about people anymore, and you don't really care about the community and these sorts of things. And like one thing that I say is like, do you think I get paid for being a social worker? Do you think your lawyers get paid? Do you think your teachers get paid? It's like everyone gets paid for a service. So now I would define, and we work in part to get money, and we do things in part to get money to support ourselves in our lives. Okay. Now, where does that become a money grab? To me, it becomes a money grab if you are spending a lot of time convincing people of something, lying to people, creating something that doesn't have any value to them, and marketing it and selling it to them as, here's something that's going to make your life a lot better, when in reality it doesn't. And you're just very charismatic and a good salesman. And so you've convinced people to buy something that's actually detrimental and harmful to them. I think there's been quite a bit of that in Pokemon this year, with people selling people things that were not worth it that much that they really wanted to get rid of, doing all that sort of thing. So is Metazoo a money grab, or are there money grab elements? Do you feel, giving you a chance to speak on this, like, do you feel like you've made any decisions, or have you done anything where you feel like this was more about making the game bigger and making more money, and less about serving the fans of the game or the audience? And where do you think those things could come up? Because in any business, that's a constant. It's something I'm asking myself all the time. Am I giving enough to the patrons? Do I deserve the support? Not wanting to be an imposter, not wanting to take advantage of people. So I want to, give you a chance to respond to that. And I want everyone to think about it in your own job, in your own profession, in your own life. You want to get paid for a service. And I think if you're a pretty ethical, moral person, you want to provide something of value that equates to the amount that you're making. And I think we can look at businesses and companies the same way, and finding that balance of like sure open capitalism and these types of things can lead to people stealing and cheating and taking advantage. But like, not everyone and not everything is trying to do that all the time. And certainly most people are not trying to just do that. And, I'd be a little hesitant to think that like someone would necessarily start a card game to do that. So and the difficulty of doing that. And you also started this card game like years ago. This isn't something it just happened to be released right in like a really strong hype period. So I want everyone to.
It was a smart thing to do, I think, in order to gain attention. But obviously there are downsides to it, which is, people immediately assume that it was this cash grab thing. But, I think like there was a lot of talk about cash grab, feelings that people had when the secondary market prices exploded. But like and people can talk to this by the thousands now. When the Kickstarter prices went up to like 2,000, we were still sending out the boxes that people had pre-ordered at $50. Like we didn't cancel any orders. And there are still products, about 95% of the product's been sent out, but pre-orders from back in April and March that people bought at $79.99, I think. And even though the prices are way more than that on the secondary market, like they're still getting their boxes. Like, we're so to the extent that like, if we wanted to make money off the secondary market, and that's kind of where the cash grab aspect comes from, like, it's just not there. Like we would have lost, like, if it was a short-term cash grab, we would be out probably millions of dollars right now, right? If it's a long-term cash grab, then that's just like, we're building a business that I want to be around 3 decades from now. And there will be money involved with it. And yes, like the intent is to make money, but the intent is to make money doing something that you love. Like if you're a doctor, or if you're a lawyer, or if you're, someone that is doing anything that they love and expect to also get paid. That's the dream. The other talk about cash grabs was related to, we released like a bunch of merch, but that merch is like mostly requested by people. And in fact, like I would say we've probably only released about 10% of the types of merch that people really, really want. And so when people are like, oh, you're selling shoes, and it's like, yeah, but like dozens of people are asking us to make shoes every day. At what point am I not going to release shoes? And does that make me like a bad person for not listening to the fans, right? Like people want Metazoo in all forms and ways, and it behooves me to listen to them. Now there are other people that don't give a shit about shoes. And so for them, they're like, why is this guy releasing shoes when all I want is cards? And it's like, well, the cards are like 3 months on back order because like it takes that long for the cards to arrive. And in the meantime, this is what we can do, right? And so like, there's not ever going to be enough of a correct enough response that will convince people that it's not a cash grab, other than I think time, right? All I have to do is, and all the Metazoo team has to do is continue to show that we're in it for the long haul. I think we've shown that in spades so far in the year that we've been in business, really since the Kickstarter started on August 1st. And, I think over time, the more that we create the world and create that ecosystem and put out sets and other products, I think the idea that we're just in this to make money off the hype and not to create an actual brand that has staying power will hopefully subside. That's my hope, at least.
Yeah. And like my perspective is like, I don't know you personally, right? So I can't trust you in any like profound way. You know what I mean? It's like, you're not my childhood friend who I can say to my audience, whether they believe me or not, and be like, Mike is like one of the most stand-up guys I've ever met. He would never like do anything to harm anyone. Right. I can't vouch for you like that, obviously, just like, but I think that it's when you say, as some people here are saying that like, one thing that people, are commenting here, something like, you gave a bunch of product to Rudy and Gary and Steve Aoki and all these people for free because you knew that it would make them care about the game, because now they have a monetary incentive in the game, and you knew that they wanted to make money, and that was the way that you could partner with them. And that makes you also all about money, and they believe, and they're saying that that's your motive, or that's what's really going on, or in those decision making. It's like, at the one hand, like it could be, right? Like those logical decisions could be made, right? It's like, I know that these influencers, I think that these influencers, are going to be more likely to be in the game if they have some of the product, which is going to give them that financial incentive to push the product, because they're going to make money off of their own product. They're going to raise their name, but like you said, it's like, that isn't how Gary ticks, or that's not, Gary would never do something like that. For Gary, it's purely about like, he loves the game, and that's why he chose to support this versus something else. And it's like, people are going to decide whatever people's motives are to themselves. For me, I'm looking for actions over a long extended period of time,
right?
As Mike just said. And like, and if Mike or Metazoo or anyone else does things that I think are, icky or whatever, first of all, I'm one dude, in my opinion, it's just my opinion. It could be right or wrong, but I'm entitled to my opinion, and everyone out there is entitled to their opinion. But I do think, I guess what frustrated me is like, where was a lot of this questioning when everyone in Pokemon was making money? And that's part of what makes me question some of the outrage specifically about this. And maybe, I don't know if you want to respond to those types of concerns. Did you give like Steve Aoki and these people product because you knew that they would then support the game, and you knew that would help it? And maybe is that even problematic or not, or is that just good marketing and good strategy? If you want to answer any of that.
I mean, I don't think that even with the full scope of what Kickstarter was at the time, or what I even expected it to be, that I can make a dent in what Steve Aoki or any of these other big influencers like could make it from like a money perspective. Like it wouldn't matter to them, right? And you know, in the case of these people who have like Rudy and Steve Aoki, because those are the two big examples that people point to, and I'm actually partnered with Steve now. They don't need the money, right? They don't need the money, and certainly for them, their image is more important than anything else. To the extent that, like, you know, they get to pick and choose who they work with because of how that affects their brand, right? And their brand is their image. So for them, for both of them, it was really important that they hop on a call with me and get to know me, because you can bet your butt that they probably had hopped on similar calls with similar people who have new and upcoming IPs and didn't like the cut of their jib because they did see that it was a cash grab, or that, you know, the person wasn't above board on everything. And those collaborations never existed, right? But I think it's ludicrous to think that I could ever give enough money to any of these people to make them want to shill a game or something like that. I think that they honestly love the product, and that was, and maybe, you know, developed a faith in me to bring it to where it needs to go as a brand. And I think that's a very common thing with people who do business is someone that I think can actually bring the brand, is the product, you know, good enough, yada, yada, yada. I mean, these decisions are happening by the thousands each day by people who are in positions of power and great wealth, right? I will say that the hope was certainly that they'd like the product and talk about it. I think that's very reasonable. But there was no expectation of that. Like, I wasn't like, you're going to get so much free product if you show my product, bro. Like, it's going to be so sweet. They wouldn't have responded to that. How many thousands of people do you think reach out to Steve Aoki on a daily basis being like, yo, listen to my music, we can collab? And he's like, all right, yeah. Or he doesn't even read it, right? But, you know, so that being said, like, I'm very happy that they like the product enough to like it. And, you know, in the case of Rudy, and Steve, they will end up making money via the collaboration with Metazoo, but that's just like business. Like, that's like, we're collaborating with each other. You know, it's kind of like the expectation for the partners that are in business is that they make money while working with a product that they love. That's, again, kind of the dream.
I think it's tough, right? Because it's, and this is one thing that I think everyone's always thinking about is like, are content creators and influencers taking advantage of their audiences to make money, right? And that's something that people are on high alert about.
Sure.
Right. So one could argue like, well, they're taking advantage of their audiences by telling them to buy Metazoo, which is somehow making them money, or, you know, in their partnership or this or that. And I think that where I always go back to is the way to avoid that is to have these types of conversations. So that people are more educated, right?
Sure.
That people have more agency, right?
Yep.
Like, in a free society, you want people, it's like people who decide to trust whoever they want to trust. They're thinking people that deserve our respect. And they're like, you know, I really trust Mike. I really like him. I really believe in him, and I'm going to buy into this. And then you can have someone else who says, you know what, I'm just not sure enough, and so I'm going to avoid this and not do it. I think, though, that when you are defamatory, right? I think when you're defamatory, or I think when you say this person is definitely evil and you really have no evidence and you're very angry, you know, when you're doing it, that's where, like, to me, it crosses that line of like respectable, like how we all should treat each other. And it's not very helpful. So I think even people who you think are behaving badly, one of my things is like, you shouldn't hope that they fail. You should actually be part of the solution and help encourage them, because you want everyone to succeed. Everyone should want everyone to succeed. Like everyone should want Metazoo to succeed, but they should also want it to be a game that brings that improves people's lives and is not a suck and doesn't take advantage of them and make money off of them and is, you know, influencer driven by people who don't care about their audiences and are just using it to, you know, absorb money. And I think that, you know, we're all complicated, and, you know, I have to work at being ethical, right? Like, I can easily take advantage, I could easily take advantage of people if I didn't every day work at not doing that. And so I think, that it's about, who do you trust, right? Like, who do you see kind of doing that over time, whether it's with Metazoo, Pokemon, but I think the theme is an important one, is like, how do we handle situations like this? How do we handle the money that's now in these hobbies and the interest and engagement, without like leading it to all of us not treating each other well, and leading to everyone just like losing all trust and like respect in people.
And it's honestly like,
Yeah,
it's an impossible question to answer until it happens, right? Like something's going to happen where, and honestly, and this is a completely different conversation, but when that trust is taken advantage of too often in a certain industry, especially one that's blowing up, right? That's usually when regulation steps in, right? So we saw with the crypto markets in 2017, where, what is the value of a cryptocurrency or an altcoin beyond kind of like what is the intrinsic value there? And that was such a fertile ground for people to scam other people, right? With collectibles, it's harder because, someone like Rudy can be like, buy Metazoo, it'll be worth it. And by the way, I don't think he ever said that. I think he was like, I'm going to make this available. I'm cautiously optimistic. He's very smart about how he markets things. But he could say like, Metazoo is really cool. If you want it, go get it. And the person can get it and it can tank in value on the secondary market. But the person's like, you know what, this is actually really cool. And it's special enough to me that I don't really care about what the secondary market value is. I care about playing with the cards. I care about seeing them in a display case on my shelf. And because there are so many different ways for people to enjoy collectibles, it's harder to say that you misrepresented the intrinsic value of it, if that makes sense. So for me, my main focus is making sure that the cards themselves, via collectability, via aesthetics, and via playability, are as intrinsically valuable in those categories as possible. My belief is if I do that, then the rest will take care of itself. People will see enough value to purchase the product at MSRP at the very least, right? And that's what my hope is, because that's, at the end of the day, I want people to buy the product and experience Metazoo with me and have it be a cultural phenomenon. Like, of course I do.
Yeah, and I think the reality is that, and whether this was unavoidable or not, or whether there were any mistakes involved in this or not, and there may not have been, this might have been like the best option way to do it, is that because of the influencer culture and the way people are buying right now, as soon as Rudy makes a video, I have friends and I know a bunch of people who just buy the boxes, whether they like it or not. You know what I mean? So it is what it is. And I don't, if I ever interviewed Rudy, I'd ask him like, what do you think of that? Like, that is happening, like 100%, like what you say, at least in the short term, maybe not the long term, right? Maybe no one can really have a significant impact on these things in the long term, although I would probably disagree with that as well. So I think once prices get established, there's a certain inertia that can connect with that. But that is a reality of the current market. Sure. But then it goes to like, whose responsibility is that? How, and that's a free market. That's a free secondary market. And the best thing you can do as someone who's interested in Metazoo is just be aware. And from an investment perspective, that's a danger in terms of investing, because these people have the product and they don't care about Metazoo. They're not holding it. They're not going to open it to enjoy it. They're going to keep it sealed and they're going to sell it or flip it back.
Oh, right? Sorry. Can I interrupt you just a second? So someone
go for it.
Is worried about you asking me tough questions and being upset about that. I'm not upset about tough questions. And I think that, like you said, this is absolutely essential, that I can answer these things in an articulate way that make people informed, right? And not just for those that are interested in investing, but those that want to make sure that the product that they're buying and the community that they're buying into is one that they want to be a part of. Like, of course I want to do that. So as long as, Jake is being respectful and he's being completely professional, that's all I care about. I'm here to answer the tough questions that I know everyone has, and I'm in no way upset about that.
And the thing is like, these conversations are really helpful for Metazoo and the Metazoo community, because rather than getting into this sort of like weird, like the Metazoo community needs to wall itself off and be defensive against like against other people. It's like maybe like we can all just talk and enjoy that we all like shiny cardboard and and like not be so kind of strangely heated. I mean, I think it's interesting that someone would think that I'm asking like I'd be interested in hearing like what question they thought was too tough or was rude, but I think it gets to kind of this, people are very like, it was funny, whenever I talk about some of these controversial things, I'm amazed at like, you have people who are like, Jake, you're being like way too soft. And there are people who are going to be like, you're shilling Metazoo now, Jake, you're a shill for Metazoo. And then there are people like, he's so horrible to Mike and all these sorts of things. And it's kind of blows my mind, kind of scares me.
You know what? The way that I see it is no community or even like interactions with communities are happening. Like they're not a monitor, right? Like people are complex and communities are complex, and you're not going to please everyone. So what you can do is kind of like you were mentioning before, like with the morality, is just do what you can to make sure that you yourself are above board, and kind of the information that you're putting out there is good. And that's my approach with the product. It's like, I want to make sure that, like, look, if the product is shit, and if I'm shilling it, and if I'm doing a cash grab, I think it would have become obvious sooner than like now, and it certainly will become obvious very soon. I'm just not sure what qualifies as a cash grab versus a normal business, although you touched on that and I agree with your definition, which is pumping product that isn't intrinsically valuable for money or whatever, right?
Yeah, whatever it is.
I think
that's actively bad for people, which plenty of companies do, to be fair. So sure. There are all sorts of companies that have products that are very bad for people that they're pushing down their throats. So that's a whole other discussion. But
every time I see a Coke commercial, I'm like, those bastards, how dare they? But I think that anyone that speaks to me understands very clearly that I'm passionate about what I'm doing, and I hope that comes across. And I think it's hard to, like, this is my baby, and I'm not asking you to trust that. The only thing that I can do is continue to act, I think, in a respectable way as a business owner, and as kind of a person that's guiding the IP into what I think it needs to develop into to kind of justify all this excitement. That's what my goal is over the next few months, honestly, is to make it more well-rounded.
I also think that there's plenty of room between Metazoo is shit and Metazoo should be, there are Metazoo cards that should be selling for over $30,000 to $40,000 to $50,000. So I think there's a lot of room in there. And I think it's also it's a bit of just a lack of nuance and sort of people's gut emotional kind of responses to these things of like, because there's very high prices, and it might be a little hard for some people to understand how those prices would get there without it being speculators selling to speculators, whether it is or it isn't. And some of the market is driven by that, but spoiler alert, as I will continue to repeat, plenty of the Pokemon market is being driven by that too. Welcome to secondary markets and collectibles. But okay, so you have all of that, but that doesn't mean that someone like me making that take is telling you that, Mike or anyone in the chat, that like, we think Metazoo shit, or that like, we don't want it to be successful, or that there are plenty of things that I like or am personally intrigued by Metazoo. One other thing I wanted to ask you, which I'm interested in, is like, who do you see Metazoo's target audience to be? Given that it's like some of these little bit more horror adult themes, even though it's kind of cutesy art, although there's also like severed heads with the cutesy art and things like that. Do you see this game ever being for kids, for teenagers, is it really going to be for like adults and young adults? What do you think? Or for anyone?
I've given a lot of thought to this. I remember when I was 8 or 7, I'm not sure what it was, I got a Sega Genesis, and the first game that my brother and I played on it, I think, was Mortal Kombat. And it was incredibly gory, but it was awesome. And, the Sega brand really, it took an alternative look at what it meant to be a kid, and said, some of these more adult themes can be handled by children, especially if they're stewarded by adults, right? Where, I played with my older brother and with my older cousins, and I got to be part of that really cool community of younger kids that was experiencing something that was a bit more mature, right? And in the US, I think it'd be doing a disservice to kids. I think we forget, what it is like to actually be a kid. And I think when a 8-year-old sees, and I know because I have an 8-year-old nephew, sees a severed head of old Green Eyes and is like, that's really cool. He's not sobbing and going to his, mom and being like, why is this person's head off his body? Like, some of them might, sure. But, in this case, it actually generated a desire for my nephew to go to Gettysburg, which is where Old Green Eyes is from. And he went there this morning with my dad. So like the target audience, I believe, is 8 and up. And the interaction that I like to see is adults our age, or a bit younger, a bit older, who are those stewards who understand what it was like to have grown up with Pokemon, from a collectability and from a brand perspective, who now have these kids or these nephews or nieces who can help educate them and say, actually, you probably want to sleeve that, not scrape it on the concrete. And I think that this generation of kids will understand those other facets of Metazoo and Pokemon. It's not exclusive, just Metazoo, or Pokemon, right? Yu-Gi-Oh, DBS, so on and so forth, because they have, old guys like us basically saying like, put that in the sleeve. So definitely 8 and above. And I honestly think that age is acceptable, specifically because we've had Pokemon and Magic and Yu-Gi-Oh for the past 20 plus years. Education in the TCG industry is different than it was back then. People are way more educated, and not just from a financial perspective.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see how these things play out. How kids today, Metazoo, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh. I'm interested in older vintage collectibles too, and if they start moving to those. Let's see what people are saying here. And if you see anything that you want to pick on, please.
Oh, so will there be an unlimited set of Metazoo? Yeah, so each set will have multiple editions. I don't want to do just like an unlimited print, which is actually comprised of multiple print runs. I want each print to have a justified number, and it'll have different edition symbols, and hopefully a little bit of added collectability, like something different from the other print runs. Just so, if you want to collect the whole master set, you can, without having to rely on like a TCA gaming video in order to see, the different versions of print runs that no one's noticed before. And he's like, if you see here, the Pokeball is a different size, so we know that that's from the 2001 print run of base set that no one's ever seen before. And it's like, I just want to be like forthcoming about what the print runs are, or what the set editions are, and just like be open about it.
So there's a comment here from Mike S, like a sarcastic comment saying, this is the compelling, hard-hitting discussion about the meta and gameplay I've been waiting for. What I want to say is like, that's funny and well said, but this is a market channel, and I'm not the person to interview Michael on the gameplay. So, that would be someone else who really plays a lot of like TCGs, hopefully in the future could interview Michael and maybe ask some hard-hitting questions on like some of the mechanics don't make sense, all these types of things. I just don't have the skills or ability, or frankly, like that much interest in going into deep depth. I'm a collector of these things. I'm a huge game player, but I like a lot of board games, big chess player, poker player. But for some reason, I played a little bit of Magic, but I never got too much into playing these TCGs. But I still really like them.
Yeah,
so I think the point of that, which is sort of right, is this frustration of like, you're just focusing on money and and collector's market and not gameplay. I do think that the money is in collectibles right now. A lot of the money, the big money, and the products tripling, quadrupling, whether that's sustainable or not, people are not paying that much money because of the playability. They're playing it because of the scarcity and rarity and collectability, right? Whether you get a black sample Mothman or a first edition Mothman, it's still the same playable card. And you also have the same Mothman, right, in like a promo form, right, that you could play with technically.
It's mechanically different.
It's mechanically different.
Actually a bit. It doesn't have the alternative win condition is what it's called. It's just it's a cool Mothman card.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough. But so the point just being, I mean, it's the same thing in Pokemon. Like, you don't need the rainbow rare, ultra rare version of a card to play it. You can get just the base EX, but a lot of people want the higher one because it's cool, and also players too really want some of the higher ones because they like to show off their deck or make it flashy too. And for me, there's like, that's where we get into this like weird gatekeeping of like, going on in all these worlds of just like, you don't collect like I collect, or you don't like these things for the reasons I like these things. And my reasons for liking these things are better than your reasons for liking these things, and it's like, it gets into that. It's just like unfortunate, that people just like aren't just happy that other people like what they like. They have to like it for the same reasons. So
I think it's a lack of, honestly, like introspection about what drives their own passion, right?
Yeah.
And because if they actually think deeply about why they like something, they see kind of the contours around that passion and why someone might have developed passion differently than they have for something that they both love, but in different ways. But people are complicated, but there's
like Adam here says, like people are buying it mostly for the stonk value rather than the art. And like, from my personal perspective, I don't know. I know there are a number of people buying it for investment and stonk value and not because of the art firsthand. Like, I know people who are buying it. I'm sure there are a lot of people, but people in the chat who love Metazoo, that isn't saying to you that you're not buying it because you like it. But you should also know, you should view that as helpful information, that I'm giving you real information about the market side, that there are people buying it who don't care at all about it and think the prices are way overpriced, but they're just jumping on the hype train and they're trying to then flip into the hype. It's just, I'm telling you straight facts, so.
Yeah, it's, and people, like, just general PSA, people loving something that you don't love doesn't invalidate your own feelings for it, right? Like, it's, or vice versa, like if they like something that you don't like, or if they hate something that you like, you're just people. It's okay. Like, it doesn't devalue your passion for something. It's kind of like, some people like playing the trombone and some people like listening to house music, and that's cool,
Yeah. I think too, there's a like, it does suck. I mean, when you share something you really like with someone and they say the art sucks, like you say, I love Metazoo, and someone's like, why? That's stupid. And the art sucks. Like, that's happened in the chat here. Like, it's going to get people heated because it's like not a nice way to talk. Like, you imagine talking to someone like that face to face, like a friend of yours, they're like, I'm really passionate about this new thing. What would you really say to them? You'd say, oh, cool, man. Like, I'm really happy for you. You don't need to like be like, that's stupid and you're an idiot,
Oh yeah, I mean, people being anonymous is it enables them in that way. What's really weird is when people aren't anonymous, they still act that way. And it's like, don't you have like a job where you have to be professional about these kinds of things? Like, you tell your boss that his breath stinks when it I don't know, it's weird. But it's par for the course of what the internet is nowadays. And I just think we have to live with it. And it's not so much what they're doing. It's how I respond. I think that I have to be smart about and understanding of that not everyone's going to like it, and that's okay. And some people will be super aggressive about not liking it. And that's when generally, like, if someone comes into our Discord, for instance, and is super disrespectful and is cursing people out and posting graphic images, we're going to ban them. And you're not welcome in the community. or at least not that part of the community, right? And some people view that as being like, you're trying to censor us, and it's like, no, like you can be negative all you want about Metazoo, but the moment that you start cursing people out for liking something that you don't like that's when you're going to be uninvited from certain official channels, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would hope that like, if I were to come in there and I were to say like, I think the market, and if we were having like a market discussion there, which maybe you don't even allow in the Discord anymore, but yeah. if there were to be market discussions and like someone was like, oh, you can't say a narrative that like it's mostly speculators buying these and not people like interested in holding or opening the product for the long term, like you like ban that person, because there are YouTube channels out there who run Discords where that happens. Like if you say a narrative that doesn't help promote their product and get people to buy it, they'll just ban you. And yeah, people are allowed to do that, but like it does show that there's a bunch of bullshit. There's a BS thing for places that do that. And so I think that I've heard that criticism about Metazoo, but you're saying that to your knowledge that isn't true or hasn't happened.
Oh, and I'm sure that mistakes have been made where, like, some people have been banned who they shouldn't have been. We're usually pretty good about having the ban appeal process where they come back in. But oftentimes, when I personally ban someone, it's because they're just being like rude and aggressive, and that's the vehicle for expressing an opinion is different than the opinion itself, right? And all I ask is that people are respectful when they even express negative opinions. But some people don't. Some people enjoy, letting loose and venting, and that's fine. But do it like there are plenty of other channels where you can do that. I don't think it's kosher to do it in the official channel where people are just trying to play the game and have cool conversations, sometimes difficult conversations, but always respectful conversations.
I think it sucks just because like we can all be your friends. Like you don't like if you're out there and you're feeling angry or upset and like isolated, like be nice to people and they'll want to talk to you and invite you into these fun communities, and you're going to get way more out of that than like spreading vitriol, no matter what community you are. Now, that being said, like if you don't like the Metazoo art for whatever reason, or you think it's this or that, like that's completely fine in your opinion. I do think like you should have probably some reasons. Like, I do think there's a little bit of a rational negativity towards the art of like, why is it so bad? Like, and people are just like, it just sucks, And then I'm like, all right, like, okay.
They'll tag the artist who's just there, like chilling and
also that's so mean. Can you imagine telling someone like, I'm a musician? Can you imagine like I go to an open mic and I play some of my like songs and someone's just like, that sucks. Like a first grader could do that, like
your face,
suck ass. It's just like
all right, it's fine.
Keep it to yourself. Like that's so mean.
Yeah. I mean, and so I mean, there are, and this is a larger conversation that we have about like how do we engage with the community? What's too much? What's too little? What's too much like heavy-handed when it comes to guiding conversation? What's too little? You can go on our subreddit, and this isn't me shilling the subreddit. I won't even say its name, but and there are hard conversations happening on the subreddit regarding the secondary market and whether or not the investment culture is impacting stuff. And we allow it to happen because it's mostly respectful. And but in the Discord, we don't allow any secondary market discussion, and because it makes more sense there than it does for the subreddit. And it's like, so these things, we're just testing a lot of this stuff out. Like we're a new company. And anyways.
I think all that's valid. I think it's about testing things out and seeing what works and what doesn't, and getting feedback. You constantly get feedback.
Yeah. Let's see what else. I can do probably one or two more questions, and then I have to go help my mom cook Italian food.
Sounds good. Yeah. Does anyone have any like last minute questions you feel like maybe we haven't touched on? And if not, then I can just sort of give you a last word and or whatever. But let's see. Let me take a quick look here and give it a second, because it takes a while for the chat to catch up to. One question is about banning people who are critical of the game mechanics.
we actually have a gameplay discussion, and we have like play testing and all that kind of stuff, and we allow for games to be played on the Discord. Being critical about the gameplay usually mean when people are upset or getting banned because of that, they usually come in and say that the fourth wall stuff is like bullshit, and it's said in a disrespectful manner. I think discussion about gameplay and improvements are done in a way on those proper channels where it's like, how can we improve this? Like, I found a fault here, so on and so forth. So again, it's not so much the criticism, it's how it's delivered. And people think that they're clever coming in and they're like, so I'm living by like a volcano, is that like totally legit? Like, I'm living inside the volcano, and it's like, well, you're probably not living inside the volcano, but you're being cheeky, and we'll let stuff like that go. But it's usually people that come in that are incredibly aggressive, and they're like, this game is so broken and it's so effing stupid. And it's like, all right, well, that's like, then you don't have to be here for that. So, yeah. Or you can talk about it on another channel, not blasting it in front of like 4,000 people. So,
yeah, it seems like that anger is coming from the fact that things are so pricey. And I guess my advice to people is like, don't buy it.
Or if you really want to play,
I'm not buying it.
We have
right? Like, I'm not buying these booster boxes for $600 or $6,000, depending on which one, and these sample cards, because they're not worth it to me at those prices. But that doesn't mean that I don't like Metazoo. I'm not hoping it's successful. It just it's and there's a way to like, and Scott Pratt like made a video about Metazoo. And so did Squeaks. And I agree with a lot of the market analysis in those videos. Like I agree with the concerns about why is this so expensive so quickly, and my concerns about people investing into it, and my concerns about influencers, that some influencers I've heard, without naming names, talk about like this is going to be very investable and push the monetary element over the other sorts of things. And as George Bott, says here, and the question I asked earlier, that was my question I wanted to really ask you, was that question of like, do you regret, maybe which influencers or all the influencers, or, were there some that you should have pushed to more? And I think you responded with, you asked tons of influencers, and some are just kind of louder and more vocal than others. And maybe some playable ones, or some other types of influencers who might have even been more critical, Now I'm perfectly critical, and, Michael contacted me, and Michael gave me 2 booster boxes, which I've promised to never sell a card or the booster box, even though I really want to sell it. Cause for me, I'd rather, from a financial perspective, have the $6,000 than have the booster box. It's just the truth. But for that ethical, so I can remain sort of neutral and feel like I can really give my opinion and can be trustworthy, I just agree. Like, I promise I'm never going to sell anything, of the 2 booster boxes that Michael gave me, to test out the game. And so, yeah, so I don't know if you want to say anything else on that, but I think, we did talk about that.
I will say that my plan is, there is actually an easy way around this. I can just make the list of all influencers and what they got public from now on. I could do that. That way, and the list for Kickstarter and first edition, I mean, the list for Kickstarter was actually a lot larger than the list for first edition. But yeah, moving forward, I can make that an official public list. I think that would remove a lot of the, that's the best that I can do. People will still say that the list is probably incomplete or, whatever, right? But I think that would make a lot more people comfortable, because they can be like, yeah, even though Squeaks didn't make a video about it, I did send him, a bunch of boxes, and he did test play it, and he was involved. And, and so it does, so people can place into context the people who are trumpeting it and the people who are silent on it. But they understand the full scope of our influencer reach out strategy. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that that would be great. You know, I always, transparency for me is always a plus, but when companies aren't transparent, I don't also just jump to like conspiracy theory. And, you know, sometimes there are reasons why companies aren't transparent that aren't necessarily counter to the interests of people interested in the product or the consumers. And so I think that I would say that as well. But I think that transparency is always great. But I also agree that, you know, and I'm learning this myself because I'm brand new to all of this. And, you know, I was like super private person a year ago. And, you know, but like, I'm learning that just like, there's a certain amount that you can kind of do and you can kind of bend over. And then, you know, it's like, they're just going to keep moving the goalposts and people are just determined to like make you a villain in their mind. Like they see you as a villain and no matter like what you do, it seems like they're going to continue to see you that way. Although I will say there have been some people that have, you know, changed their opinions on me, that have, you know, shifted over time by seeing me act in a certain way over a long period of time. And so, you know, it can be worth it to really talk to and hear out people who have concerns about you, you know, and reach out.
Clarify really quickly. Squeaks actually did buy the booster boxes. I didn't mean to imply I gave it to him. He did buy them. And he never agreed to, in exchange for that, to make a video. I just wanted to be clear. But he was one of the people that influencers that I did talk to for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Squeaks and I had a number of conversations around that of like we were interested in the game and we had very similar takes on the market side and very similar takes on our concerns.
Yeah.
And we both were interested in it, but we didn't want to we don't want to be hypocrites and take free product and then try to flip it or sell it, you know. So
yeah, I'm glad
we should not attempt to make money off of Metazoo in any way. I can back that up as well.
Yeah. So thanks for clarifying that, Squeaks. But yeah, no, I mean, it's kind of like a final thing to say is, if you can't buy in at Metazoo at this price point, like wait, like more product is on its way and we're doing everything that we can for it to enter into the market at MSRP. And, you know, if cards aren't your jam, we're coming out with other stuff as well. And I hope that you give Metazoo a fair shake and enjoy the product and you know, have fun, because at the end of the day, you know, let's have some fun. That's kind of the cool thing about being a part of a community like this and playing games and collecting things, is ultimately doing something that you enjoy.
I have, there's one comment here from Aramash just saying like, you know, it's rude of me to say to you that, you know, if I could sell one of your boxes, I would, because I wouldn't keep it at $6,000 profit. I'm curious, like, how you feel about that. And I apologize if I'm being too, I tend to be so transparent and with like, with myself. That,
I think that you offered to pay for it, but I insisted that you didn't. And you were just interested in the gameplay mechanics and stuff. I think Squeaks got his stuff a lot earlier than you did. So you were able to see the gameplay kind of firsthand or secondhand through him. So maybe it didn't make sense to open the boxes, or maybe you just didn't care about the gameplay, which guess what is also okay.
Like, I don't that much, right? For me, it's about collectability, and I want to keep one sealed as a memento.
This goes back to what we were talking about before, which is like, it's okay that the way that you interact with things is less about the gameplay, more about the collectability. I mean, I'm pretty sure that there are people out there who are playing with Metazoo cards who don't give two shits about its price on the secondary market and are like scratching it on concrete to make sure that, you know, it's theirs. Like, I hope they're not doing that, but maybe they are. I did that with Pokemon cards. But, you know, like, so I don't begrudge you at all for keeping that stuff sealed. I think that's awesome. And I think it's awesome that you're connecting it to something moral that you did, and or that that you view as a moral obligation on your part. And I think that if more people did stuff like that, the world would probably be a better place.
So thank you so much for coming on, Michael. You know, I appreciate you taking the time. You certainly, you know, have not shied away from these types of discussions, and, you know, and appreciate that. And I wish you, the best of luck, and for the fans of Metazoo, for them to enjoy the game and keep collecting and engaging in the game. And just because I don't value that box at some of those prices, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't. I'm not making a commentary on what other individuals should do. But I think that, I'm not a financial advisor, but I would say, in new markets, just be careful, but I say the same thing to the Pokemon community. Trust me, I'm one of the most kind of be careful voices in that community when we talk about investing in cardboard at all. So, and yeah, I just really want to thank Michael for taking the time. And, is there any sort of last word that you have, for the chat, and we can, end it there and maybe pick up the conversation some other time?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you for having me. Really fun conversation. I love kind of deep conversations like this. I think whether you are looking to collect, invest, play, just have it sit on on your shelf to look pretty because you like pretty things. You should always be as informed as you can be. And so conversations like this help. And even the conversations that are hard are always made easier when they're done in a respectful way. So thank you for being respectful. Not surprising at all. I've been watching you for a long time. So yeah, and give me an opportunity for everyone else out there to prove to you that I'm in this for the long haul. I'm doing everything in my power to make Metazoo a global brand that we can all be part of. And yeah, this is my life now. And I appreciate you giving me a chance.
Sweet, man. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm actually particularly interested in some of the other sets, like the Japanese and some of the other world sets are going to be, I think particularly up my alley. And I'm interested in learning about like the different cryptids that are out there. So I'm hoping to be able to get the boxes at affordable prices.
Well, hey, second edition is around the corner, so is Nightfall. And yeah, let's do this. Maybe once a month we can have a conversation if you're interested. Doesn't even have to be public, but whatever. I think having these conversations also helps me put things into perspective. So.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to keep open lines of communication, and if you ever have questions for me, absolutely, and I'll do the same if something comes up and that I see or whatever, So cool, man. All right, thank you so much. Thank you all for hanging out. I'm gonna stay just a little bit just to wrap up with people and maybe just like answer, because we didn't get to Pokemon today, but we could because I'm interested in your opinions on the market there and all that sort of stuff if you want to talk about it, but maybe in another time. Thank you so much for coming on, and I think I can if you just leave the Zoom call.
All right, beautiful.
That'll be the best way.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Michael. All right, guys. All right, so hope you guys enjoyed that. I think it's an interesting topic, and just interesting to see people's feelings about that game, both positive and negative, and somewhere in between. So I thought it'd be cool to have Michael on. I also think it's just cool that he created a new game, and I think we can learn a lot about how markets work and how hype works and how establishing markets work by watching what happens with Metazoo and also by watching what decisions Michael makes. So it's a cool learning activity, and Michael has been super, polite with me, and, we've had really nice back and forth and engagement. So, I was happy to have him on and, have like a civil, what I think is like a very civil, interesting discussion about things. So, okay, so let's do some Pokemon. Blitzray says, "Grats, Jake. You made it through another interview." Yeah, this one, like, there are quite a few dislikes on this. I'm curious. I'm interested. Like, are people disliking that I was too harsh? Are people like disliking that we talked about Metazoo at all? It's kind of interesting. Do people just like to dislike things, some new people in the chat who usually aren't here. That's interesting. Forrest still says you can't knock someone for creating something, whether a painting or a TCG or whatever. Yeah, I mean, I think when someone tries to create something and build something, whether that's a company or something, artistic or whatever, there's something I think that should be really appreciated and admired and encouraged by that. And it doesn't mean that people are it doesn't mean that people are it doesn't mean that there aren't going to be like problematic things, or that doesn't mean that there aren't going to be like motives involved in that you may not like. But it's also pretty it's pretty cool when people just do things outside the norm and take a risk. I mean, I admire Michael and like what he's done, in terms of just like starting a new game, putting himself out there, going on all these interviews, becoming like an influence. Like there's a lot to, I think, admire in all of that. And, I think, as I said in the interview, I did not grow up with Michael. He's not a dear friend that I can like vouch for every motive. I said the same thing in my conversation with Gary. It's the same thing with so many people in the community, but like from every interaction I've had with him and from everything I've seen from him, so far, outside of, I think, a few bloopers around, some secondary market stuff and, here and there, I think that it's there are other people around who I have more issues with, let me put it that way. But we can all watch and see how it goes. And certainly that doesn't mean that you need to like Metazoo or you need to dislike Metazoo, and whatever. I think it's interesting. Let's see. Blitzray says watch Scooby-Doo if you want to learn about cryptids. Matt Deacon says whether it succeeds or fails, you can still admire the effort. Yeah, I mean, that's how I feel. Like I just think it's really cool when people like try to create things and start their own businesses, and people are going to make mistakes and people are going to maybe do unethical things and maybe even, be greedy here and there. I'm not saying he is or has done that in any way, but like, that's also like to be somewhat expected when you're trying something new, like you're going to make mistakes. Elsie said, seems like it's pretty hard to start a new game in this climate. Gabriel says Metazoo fans are shills, and then crying. Rip and Flip says you can't knock the hustle, his hustle. You think he's hustling people? Aramas says, I feel like there's an interest air around Metazoo, and I hope to see it succeed. But if it ultimately doesn't, you can't say the guy wasn't passionate, and nobody can say he didn't try. George Bott said, I gave Metazoo the benefit of the doubt up until tonight. Maybe people want to collect/play it. The unsavory people that appeared in the chat today make me want to dislike Metazoo now. Oh, were people like super rude, George Bott? I'm gonna have to look in the chat later. I mean, we certainly, I don't know. I do think that there are certainly people coming from Metazoo who seem a bit like, I don't know, but I saw stuff in the chat too that was like, Metazoo art's terrible and like we hate you, so I think anyone saying that to like Metazoo fans is being like unnecessarily, hostile. But I definitely believe that there are people in the Metazoo community who are like either shilling it because they own a lot, or they just really like it and they are a little immature and can't handle like other people not liking what they like, or are so defensive of it because they feel so attacked. I mean, I think that part of the Metazoo community, part of what I say is that there seems to be this feeling of like we're always under attack and we have to defend and all this sort of stuff. So Manny said people were unnaturally pumping it up. Yeah, I think what's nice is usually we also just like don't, there's like no shilling that goes on here one way or another in our community. Your average player says people love to hate. Ed Stadium says shit was being slung on both.
I didn't get that.
Ooh, my computer's freaking out. I believe it. Yeah, the thing is like, even if you don't like Metazoo, I think from a like as a game or as a collectible, I think for me, why I like talking about it is that I'm interested in it from like a like a psychological, market perspective of like, it's so interesting how expensive these things have got. It's so interesting how heated people are on both sides. When things like that happen, I'm very interested in human behavior and learn and trying to think about and figure out like what's going on here, Nick Strength in Pokemon says, he thinks it's great. He got into it because of the Loveland Frogman. I grew up in Loveland, Ohio. It's super cool to see that kind of small town representation and something we love like a CCG. That's cool, man. That's very cool. George Bot says, cardboard is a hell of a drug, Jake. Benor says, Metazoo is like ugly Christmas sweaters. There's a market for it, but most people don't like it. I mean, I like it. Like, do I love it? Do I think it's like gonna change the TCG landscape forever and that the art is like, I need to have it? Some of the cards I actually really like some of the cards not to that extent, but like some of the cards I actually really like. And I found myself, interestingly, when I first saw it, I kind of had, and again, this is just my personal opinion, guys. I'm not saying other people need to think or feel how I feel. Geez, but like my personal feelings on it was something like, in the beginning, I kind of had a little bit of like, I'm not sure I really like this. I don't think the art's that great. And then as I looked at it more, I really liked like Babe the Blue Ox, the Frog, Loveland Frogman, right? It's called. Like there were a few things that I really liked. And, do I see myself becoming a super fan of Metazoo where I'm, it's like the main thing that I collect and really enjoy? No, but I think it's cool. And I love TCGs and CCGs, and I love opening packs, and I love collecting and completing sets. And so I love to do that with those two. Ice9 says, games like this are so impacted by light speed information travel and FOMO culture. Growing up, it took years for collectibles to appreciate. I still think MZ is one that will appreciate. Yeah, I mean, I think that some of that's true, S9. Some of it isn't, right? Like some of it, like the way that like Beanie Babies started and Pokemon started, to be fair, but like particularly Beanie Babies is a great example of it, is like the same type of mania and market mania can happen around sort of like anything that's hot and new. And what makes it sustainable is the rarity, the IP being strong enough that it connects to a person across their lifetime. And so I think that, one issue from the investment collectibles perspective is that often a lot of people often spend big money for things that they had when they were kids and that they were engaged with somehow when they were in their critical periods of their lives. And if Metazoo isn't going to be really super geared towards kids, although Michael said like it could be, and it could be particularly for like, not super young kids. And it could have a really strong effect because it could be like, oh my gosh, like here's this cool thing that like we're not really allowed to look at. And, it's kind of a little bit adulty themed, but also kind of like cute charactery. So there are all sorts of things to think about there. I think though that like the odds of like Metazoo doing it versus like a number of other card games that might come out later or in the next few years, I mean, Metazoo has Mike, who seems to be like really smart, really dedicated. It has like Rudy, Gary, a lot of these like other big influencers who have been involved in the successes of a number of card games. And, it has a lot going for it right now. So, I think that there's potential there, but at the end of the day, that influence and that sort of thing can only mean so much in the long run. Over time, people, I do think, tend to like the hype and the mania kind of moves on, and you're sort of left with the product. You're left with the thing. How much do you actually like this when all the bells and whistles are gone, when all of the perceived I'm going to make more money on this product is gone, when some of the community might be gone? Are people still going to love it? Are people still going to like it? Is it still going to be important to you? Nick Strank in Pokemon says on a Pokemon tangent, what do you think about the celebrations leaks? I haven't thought about like too much. I think that my initial reaction was just it's unfortunate and a bit irritating. I think that my reactions were like, first of all, like how did those get out? You know, and my immediate guess, having no knowledge of the situation, would be like, well, someone, and maybe this shows that I a bit of my cynical side, but that someone probably stole it or sold it and made some money against Pokemon companies' wishes. Can't imagine the Pokemon company ever. I've heard theories about maybe the Pokemon company did it. It's like I can't imagine why they would leak their own product. Like there isn't enough hype, or and I think that's unfortunate because it's nice to be surprised. It's nice to open a set and not be sure what comes into it. It's nice to like go, or if you want to watch a YouTube video in excitement or anticipation of like, oh, what's going to be open? And I'm going to watch my favorite YouTuber kind of open the set first and see the cards, for the first time, that sort of thing. And I think that, that's unfortunate that it's been taken away, and it might affect a little bit of the hype. I also think it causes some of the hype to happen well before the product comes out, because now people see the card, they get really hyped, they really want it. Will they be as excited for it when it comes, or will they have now get sort of desensitized to it over the next few months? And will that kind of take away a little bit from the release? So I think both the ickiness of the possible like people making money off of that, and some of just my personal icky feelings about like anyone who steals for their steals or cheats. And then some of my my feelings about it. It's unfortunate that maybe as a Pokemon community, the anticipation has kind of been bursted like very early. So let's see. Basic Trainer says, why all the heat for how they have been marketing? Am I the only one not seeing it all as marketing for success, as successful marketing? Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's hard to know, right? Like every little decision, we don't know every little decision they made behind the scenes, why they made it, why Michael made every little calculated decision he made. He probably makes tons of decisions, and and if I were, in the boardroom with him, thinking about the decisions, there might be a decision he might have made where I was like, what, I don't think that's the best for the game, because I think that it's, whether it's fair or not, it's going to present this image of the game. I think we should maybe focus on these influencers, or focus on maybe bringing that out, a little bit slower over time, or engaging those influencers a little bit later. Or we should, encourage influencers not to tell people that the game is investable. We should, and I think another thing I forgot to talk about today or bring up as a question is the idea of grading, and like pushing grading Metazoo early, but at the same time, like I don't really see, I think people who were grading Metazoo early and talking about that as a really good investment, I'm like, that seems like a little bit of a jump. But like, if I were starting a card game, it would be so cool if people were grading my card game. I think I'd feel very uncomfortable if they were going for large amounts of money, because I'd be like, these just came out and like, I'm a little afraid for you. But if I'm being completely honest, but it must be a cool feeling to have people like your stuff, and to, like it enough that they're like grading it, and keeping it in great condition, and that grading companies are willing to grade it. Of course, Beckett will grade a lot of things, as we always say, but Anna in Shackelford says, the only problem was the size of the print run and the lack of product. Oh, and it's all damaged. Yeah, I mean, there clearly was an issue, right? That they're working to address. I'm hearing, right, that a lot of the product had like damages on the things like on the corners. Like the cards themselves didn't necessarily get damaged, or hopefully aren't damaged. Although they were claiming that before ever actually opening all of the boxes to see, but whatever. I think it's probably unlikely that the cards got damaged. But as far as like the size of the print runs that you're talking about here, you know, we just don't know like what Michael was thinking, right? Was he worried that if we put too much out there, it wouldn't get all bought up? Was he trying to create some scarcity in the market? I mean, Pokemon is making those decisions as well. Like all these companies try to make those decisions. So. Andrew M says, after this chat, I think Michael is a normal dude, and I'm more inclined to like Metazoo than I was previously. Yeah, I mean, when I talk to in my conversations with Michael, even though, yes, I definitely can be cynical too and skeptical. And, you know, when I see these prices for these things, it makes me cynical and skeptical too. And, you know, but in my conversations with Michael, it's always been, you know, he's someone that I could see myself becoming friends with, you know, and getting to know better. And then through that, I probably trust him a lot more, you know, when I, you know, if I like really got to know him, that type of thing. And I commend him, you know, honestly, on taking a lot of the you know, the negativity and critiques, you know, a lot of which I think is valid. So. Manny said, were there always super expensive modern sports boxes? And is the reason modern sports cards are so valuable / speculated on solely because of the rookie card concept? Yeah, the reason that modern boxes are so expensive is because of like your one of one, you know, autographed, you know, RPAs, rookie patches. That's why they can charge for like things like national treasures, why they can like first off the line, you know, can go for like $8,000 for a single booster box. Farcel says, do you think I'm going to go for about 15 more minutes, guys, by the way, if you guys want to drop some Pokemon questions or just your general thoughts. Farcel says, do you think modern Pokemon cards will see a major drop in value once the 25th anniversary is over? No. If I had to guess, but who knows? You know, I don't think that like, I don't think it's like that big of a deal, honestly, one way or the other. I think the Pokemon hobby is booming in largest part just because people were home this year and had, you know, a lot more income to spend on things and were online a lot more, and content creators were talking about it and they were running into it a lot more, and it reminded them of it. And I think in 2016, the main reason was because of Pokemon Go. So I don't think it was because of like the evolution set, or it was because of the Hidden Fate set that so many people got into it. I think it just happened to be that like those sets were the ones that were out and around, particularly around those times and event periods. And I think it's just kind of, it just happened to be like, if the pandemic and Logan Paul and all that stuff had happened like a year earlier, the same thing would have happened. I think that was really the driving force this year, if I were to have to venture a guess. Let's see. Elsie says, has anyone else experienced a slow summer for Pokemon selling? Nice opportunity to pick stuff up, but hard to find buyers. Yeah, I think that, you know, for certain items, that is true. And, you know, broadly speaking across the board, but there's some items that, you know, like I've gotten some high offers on certain things that I, you know, higher than I've ever had before. So it's a little bit, you know, the market doesn't work uniformly, but overall, that's definitely, you know, what I'm hearing across the board, particularly from people who sell large amounts in bulk and are constantly selling. Joe Cartwright says, do you think the divisiveness around Metazoo could actually benefit them? Yeah, I mean, you know, it brings more attention, those sorts of things. I think in the long run, you know, it doesn't really matter that much. I think that I think that in the short run, it's good because it gets people engaged and interested in the product. And then the product sort of has to do a lot of the work from there, that people have to actually really like it. And there has to be a lot of effort into building a community, because I think a big part of why any of these things are successful is because people like to do things with other people. And so like the friendships that are being made in the Metazoo community, like people making friends with other people, like that's the stuff that's going to be just as important for people staying devoted and engaged in Metazoo as the actual cards themselves. And it's the same thing in Pokemon. It's the same thing in all these areas. Like so much of it is about community and connection with others and sharing experiences with others. Basic Trainer says Pokemon Classic says he foresees another spike like last fall, but to a lesser extent due to celebrations. Your take? If I had to guess, I like don't think there'll be a spike particularly. I think what you're going to be seeing is you're going to be seeing sporadic spikes on certain cards, because what happens when markets kind of, have big corrections is some things tend to like overcorrect. And if you can buy those cards when they've overcorrected, if you feel like there's a bit of negativity or kind of overcorrection on certain items, you might be able to pick those up. Very hard to time that and guess that, of course, but it does exist. And then you might see some bump up on some of those cards, but that is just going to way more have to do with the correction off of prices going maybe too low or a little bit too much fear in the interim, and not having to do with something like celebrations. That's my guess. Now that though, I think is very true more for like the vintage and the higher end. Is it possible that like some modern, and that celebrations might be a big hit, and it might bring kind of a lot more people, interested in kids, interested in like maybe opening up some packs and some of kind of the lower end side of the hobby in terms of price, not in terms of quality. That could be, I could see that, but I'm not a big proponent of the idea that the sets, as I said before, we're super responsible for like anything that really happened or the quality of the sets. But I do think going forward, quality of sets is going to be very important, particularly now that I think people are getting a bit less like everything Pokemon's amazing and a bit more kind of like, what do I really like in Pokemon? And there's so many options to collect, and maybe I should be a little bit more careful with my money and just collect the stuff that I really like and go after that sort of stuff. So, Ann in Shackleford says, will Vivid Voltage and Chilling Reign come down to current battle styles prices? I have no idea. We'll have to do mainly with reprints probably, and overall popularity of Pokemon, both of which I can't really predict. I'm going to make a video on modern Pokemon. I actually already shot it, but I'm going to be putting it out. It's funny, like Z and G, James, if you're still here, I made a video like on a very, like, I feel like I've done this with you a few times where we just happen to like make the same video at the same time, unintentionally. But like your recent video, it has some of the themes that I was going to talk about, with some slightly different takes, but so I'll be releasing that soon. Just my general feelings on like investing in modern in general, which I think it's a well overdue that I actually have a video talking about it. Carl Chambers says, do you think going forward, the Pokemon market will largely center around PSA 10s again, if many people leave? So it will only center on 10s if all the prices go down to the point where 10s are affordable for people. So if 10s become, the reason that 9s and 8s, 9s were, people did like 9s a little, 3-4 years ago. But the reason that like no one collected 8s or 7s is because 10s and 9s were very affordable, and 10s were affordable for most people. And so there was just no reason. So if prices go down enough that 10s become super affordable, then 9s and 8s and all that sort of stuff will cease to be of much interest to people probably. And, but I don't think that's going to happen, at least in the immediate future, but you never know. Let's see. Some people sharing just like sales have slowed down. Jamie says that he's actually sold more recently. So very, it's just interesting. and says it depends on what you're selling. Forrest Hill says, do you think Pokemon had its floor increased? Never been better than now to collect and play the game, get rich quick ones, come and go. Yeah, likely. So although I think the floor has been potentially lowered in some sort of disaster scenario for certain items because the supply has increased so much of graded cards and you have all of these grading companies grading. So there might be some items that get graded so much over the next year that if there like was some sort of like, you know, larger macroeconomic issue in the country or the world, combined with lots and lots of slabs coming back from PSA of certain items, you could see like items actually selling less than they were even selling like 2 years ago. It's very, very unlikely. But that would be the only reason. I think that there are certainly more people interested in Pokemon now. Like the demand is higher and will stay higher for the foreseeable future. I think that it would be very foolish to bet against that. But the supply side might be quite a bit higher for certain items, and that may not work out. You know, there might be some more issues. You know, I'm thinking specifically for certain, you know, common, uncommon, like unlimited cards that may get graded tons of, or, you know, on the vintage side, and then, you know, certain modern evolutions cards, you know, that type of thing. Just Poking Fun says, do you think that winter cold months and possible lockdowns will cause a spike? Definitely could. It definitely could. Like that to me would be like, those are the types of reasons that I think are more impactful than like a celebrations. I could end up being wrong about that. And I do think that Pokemon like partnering, you know, more with, you know, celebrities and bringing more people in, like it could bring some more interest and attention to the market. It is definitely possible. So, all right, so let's do just like a couple more questions and then we will end for today, and we'll be back again next week. I also have another live stream because we didn't do Pokemon too much today, so I want to make sure to treat you guys well. So we will have another live stream on Tuesday with a Pokemon person where we will talk about the market and collecting and all that good stuff. Got to give the people what they want. Got to keep the people happy. And some people maybe just really didn't want a Metazoo video or whatever. Kid Terry says, Jake, do you know the official name of the Pokemon Bible? I do not. I literally just know it as like the Silver Bible. So I do not know like the official name. Just Spoken Fun says these XY and prior print runs have relatively small runs comparatively to the new demand or sets like Battle Styles to act like Flash Fire is not a set you can't invest in and can't consider is modern. Yeah, it's just tough. It's tough with sets like that. Like a lot of my concern, Just Poking Fun, for sets like that is more of the historic nature and value and importance of those sets. Like that's what I worry about. Like I don't worry as much about the rarity, although there's so much Flash Fire. Like there's so many jungle boxes. Don't get me wrong. Like there's so much of tons of things, right? But like these things are just very expensive. So, you know, when we compare it to other hobbies, so it's just, there's a lot of risk. Doesn't mean that it can't be good investment. It can't go up. You know, I would never say that things can't, you know, I mean, there are very few items in the hobby that I feel like can't go up, or that I feel like will have a really difficult time going up. You know, I mean, to me, the worst items to invest in are going to probably be like PSA 10 and 9, like evolutions cards. Like those are probably one of the only things that I think is just going to be so hard for those to go up in value over time, at least in the short term. But almost everything else, like literally almost everything else, there's a decent argument to be made that, it all could go up. Adam Sislow says, Jake, how do you feel about eBay's card analytics and tracking? It's a very handy tool in my opinion. I haven't gotten a chance to look into it too much. I tried it a little bit and I was like, I'm intrigued. I hope it ends up being like really useful and cool. That would be so great. And you guys know that I'm working on, a little bit of that sort of stuff. But if like eBay has something that's like really, amazing, that would just be so great for myself and so many people in the community. So I really hope that it's like an excellent tool. Jamie Scott says, what do you think about all the new grading companies popping up? We have had 3 in Australia in the last year. I question the longevity. Yes, it's all part of mania periods. There's a lot of money to be made. And so you're going to get a lot of new card games. You're going to get a lot of new grading companies. You're going to get a lot of everything because there's a lot of money and interest. And with that money and interest in it's capitalism, there's going to be more people kind of starting YouTube channels, starting Patreons, starting, selling courses, selling information. On my side, there's going to be more people, opening booster box breaks and trying to start their channels and their businesses like Leonhardt, so, and then there's going to be more grading card companies trying to do what PSA did. And there's going to be more Pokemon card companies trying to start new companies doing what they did. And so that's all part of natural increased interest in anything. Let's see. I'm going to head to the bottom here and just make sure we basically touched on most things here. Sorry if I missed your question. There's lots of comments. Aiden M says, thoughts on the futsal Pikachu going on eBay? Honestly, for 16,000, I have not heard anything about it, so I don't have thoughts, but I could look into it. There's always a million things happening. Okay, I think we're going to end there because it looks like, and Mandy says, do you digitally catalog your inventory? Digitally, no. Okay, well, I'm going to end it there. Thank you all so much for hanging out today. I really appreciate it. It's been great. Evidently there are some people who like didn't enjoy the conversation or had strong things one way or another. I think the conversation was civil and positive, and I enjoyed it. I wish everyone a great week. And let's see, any news? No news for me. Tuesday night, if all goes to plan, we will be doing a live stream. And talking about Pokemon and collecting mainly, although we're going to have someone who knows tons about other TCGs too, so we can talk about a lot of different things. And I guess that's it for today. So thank you all so much for hanging out on this Sunday with me, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Take care.